So, we're going to talk about Diffie Hellman, which is the big leap forward that made cryptography so extremely useful, so extremely important. In fact, I think I see a way, by the way, to fix this. Aha. I think that might do it. Yeah, that'll make it less annoying. All right, so we're going to talk about the Diffie Hellman function, Diffie Hellman problems, key agreement protocols. So, in 1976, there was a giant leap forward in cryptography. There was a top secret technique reserved for use by the U.S. military. They've been using it for decades, reportedly, although I'm not sure any official statements have been released explaining this. But independently on the outside, Whitfield Diffie and Martin Hellman reinvented this miraculous technique of communicating secret information over an insecure channel without ever having a secure channel to distribute a shared secret key. And that was this technique, public key distribution scheme, and the Diffie-Hellman protocol. And this created the modern internet and all modern secure connections. So the point is, you can exchange a secure secret without directly sending that secret over the wire. And you can turn the secret into a key, and then you have a secure channel. So it's very mathematically simple. In fact, it is deceptively simple. Hello, Mole. It looks very easy to program, and I'm going to play a video after this of someone explaining the reasons why you should not be using RSA, and you especially should not be programming it yourself. It looked easy, and we used it for decades, but it is probably fair to say it should no longer be used at all because it turned out to have a lot of problems. But the idea is extremely simple. The group Z star P we've talked about before, if P is a prime number, this includes all the integers from 1 up to P minus 1. So in Diffie-Hellman, you use that simple group, and the two parties choose random elements A and B that are just secrets. They do not have to be prime. They just need to be any number in this group. And then you choose a number G, which is not a secret, which is a generator of the group. And for this group, any number will be a generator. So you just pick some number, G, and publish it. It's not secret. And so Alice and Bob are trying to communicate secretly over the internet. Alice chooses A and keeps it secret, and Bob chooses B and keeps it secret. Then they transmit. Calculate capital A is G to the A, and capital B is G to the B, and they transmit capital A and capital B. And now Alice can calculate capital B to the A, which is going to be G to the AB, and Bob can calculate capital A to the B, which is also going to be G to the AB. So now they both have agreed on a shared secret without ever directly sending that over the wire. What they've sent are numbers which are only distantly connected to the shared secret, and in a way that when things work correctly, it's essentially impossible for an attacker to deduce the shared secret from what's sent over the wire. So this is just the same thing explained. And by the way, everything is, of course, mod P. That's the basic function. And of course, now you have agreed on a shared secret, but the shared secret is not particularly random or anything. It's just a number up to P, this G to the AB, and so it's probably not really appropriate to use yet as an encryption key for something like AES. So what you do is you run it through a key derivation function like we talked about before, which is typically done by adding a salt, running it through a hash function a number of rounds, and then taking a certain number of bits off that to create a random-looking value of the correct size, like 128 bits for AES. So it turns out you can't use all values of P and G. For the highest security, both this number and half of it should be prime, and those are called safe primes. And so it turns out that they're slow to generate, 1,000 times as long as making a mere random prime. So this just begins the series of problems where, in fact, only certain values of parameters in RSA work. And the video I'll play after this will show you a lot more reasons why a lot of parameters are not safe to use in RSA. But you can generate it here. You can generate Diffie-Hellman parameters with OpenSSL, the way we've done it before. This gives you a 20,048-bit Diffie-Hellman, and it took 154 seconds to do it. So it takes a long time to do. And if you generate an RSA, it only takes 0.16 seconds. So it's much faster because it doesn't have that issue of safe primes. Anyway, so the fundamental problem that determines how hard this is the discrete logarithm problem. You have published g to the a, that was the capital A you sent over the wire, and the attacker would have to determine a. So they need to reverse this. All you know is g to the power a, g is the known generator, a generator to the power of a, mod n, and you want to find out what the a is, and this is the discrete logarithm problem. And it's very similar to the factorization problem we talked about before, and it depends on this hardness, and as far as anybody knows, that problem is plenty hard. So if the eavesdropper here, here's Alice sends this capital A, which is g to the a, Bob sends this capital B, which is g to the b, and in order to get this shared secret, the attacker has to discover either little a or little b, and in either case, the attacker has to take one of these power values and reverse the power. And that turns out to be very difficult. And so there's a related problem called the computational Diffie Hellman problem. We're given only these public values and not the secrets. Is there some way to get to the shared secret? Perhaps not by directly determining A or B. There might be some way to use these public values and get there without deducing these, but nobody knows, and nobody has proposed such an algorithm. If you want to see how difficult it is, the Diffie Hellman protocol is considered to provide 90 bits of security with 2048-bit primes, which is the same as RSA with the 2048-bit n. Remember, we talked about this before. If this was a shared secret system like AES, then the number of bits of security would equal the number of bits in the key. But since these are only using prime numbers, it's much less. And anyway, that's how it works. And so the fastest known attack is the number field sieve, like the one we talked about before, the general number field sieve. And that gets you to something like 2 to the 90 calculations to crack the 2048-bit key. So if you know only the publicly transmitted data and you want the shared secret, you would like to know that the attacker cannot deduce any portion of the shared secret. And that's the idea. That's called the decisional Diffie Hellman problem. These are all slightly different versions of the same thing. You want all these problems to be hard to trust the cryptographic system. And so they're related. If the decisional Diffie-Hellman problem is hard, then the computational Diffie-Hellman is hard, and so on. All these related problems are similar hardness as far as anybody knows. So the key agreement protocols go here. There's something called authenticated key agreement, which would be good. This is what 3G and 4G use. So they have a pre-shared secret in addition to this. So you must have had a secure channel to transmit the secret between the two ends at one time in the past. And so you add a pre-shared secret to it, and now you have authentication in addition to the Diffie-Hellman exchange. That makes it much stronger. So here, you're going to pick a random value r, compute the pseudo-random function of the key, the pre-shared secret, and r, random number, and then you're going to send those over here. So this is a way to do it. To verify things, as we talked about before, this is essentially a challenge handshake protocol. You send calculated values across based on this shared secret key. So only a holder of the shared secret key is going to be able to create the right response. That's the authenticated key agreement. And so this doesn't use Diffie-Hellman. It just uses a random value, you compute a shared value, and here you send the random value publicly, like a nonce, and the calculated value. And so this is a way to agree on a shared secret, agree on a shared secret to use for this encryption based on a permanent shared secret here, a long-term shared secret. All right, now there you can have a replay attack, unfortunately. If you just capture the public data this one sends, but you do not have the key to decrypt it, well then if you ever use the same random value r again, then a person who's been collecting these will be able to find the right response and send it to you. They'll be able to impersonate this. Now they won't be able to read the messages that are sent, but they will be able to fool you and think they are the authenticated person at the other end when they aren't. So to prevent that, you need to make sure r is not reused. If the attacker gets the long-term shared secret k, then, of course, they can impersonate either party, perform man-in-the-middle attacks, can record everything, and later decrypt them using the captured R values because this protocol does not have forward secrecy. The only thing that changes here is the random value R, and the key is always the same. So if I read the first message and I get your value of R, I can deduce the shared secret key and read everything. So if the secret key is ever compromised, then an attacker can totally fool every part of the system, and that's not good. All right, So if you have an eavesdropper, and you're going to consider various models here, if all the attacker can do is intercept data in the middle and observe it, then they record modified drop or inject messages, so they are a man-in-the-middle attack. Then you must make sure the protocol does not leak any information about the shared secret, so that with all the data they get, they cannot deduce the shared secret. Now, a data leak would say they get the session key and temporary secrets, but not the long-term secret. And then there's a breach, where they learn the long-term secret. And so, that may learn the long-term secret, then there's no way to protect the current session, but you might have a protocol that changes every time, so you can protect future sessions. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Take care of yourself, Shu. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Shu. Yeah, but there will be a video. Good? Yeah, a lot of people are getting sick. It's that time of year. All right, so here's goals you might want. For mutual authentication, you want each party to authenticate to the other party so both of them know with high confidence who they're talking to. That would be good. And then the authenticated key agreement will happen once your protocol has authenticated both parties. So for key control, neither party can control the final shared secret. This is something missing from 3G and 4G. Thank you. Thank you for telling me. She, like the president of China then. Anyway, so the first person to start the transmission chooses R, and that determines everything. So in this case, one party can control the final shared secret. So that is an important fact about this, and probably a weakness. So we talked before about forward secrecy. Forward secrecy means even if I get all the long-term secrets, so I can read the current session, I will not be able to read future sessions. This became very important when Snowden leaked out the information of the NSA's attacks. This is what caused everyone to rapidly upgrade from TLS 1.1 to I think 1.2 or 1.3. I think it's 1.3 that has perfect forward secrecy. The NSA had been archiving all the encrypted traffic in Utah, waiting to eventually find the private keys later and decrypt all that old stored traffic. And that would work with protocols that do not have forward secrecy, like 3G and 4G and TLS 1.1. But later protocols that do have forward secrecy have a different key for every session. So even if you get all the secrets, you can only read one session, and the next session will be different and you won't be able to decrypt it. So you can consider the performance, how many messages have to go back and forth during the handshake, how long are the messages, how are the computations are required, can you pre-calculate some of the computations. But the main cause of latency is typically round-trip time, processors are fast, and networks are slow. All right, so 3G and 4G exchange two messages of a few hundred bits each, and a lot of it can be pre-calculated. You can even pick a bunch of values of R in advance and do some of the calculation. So 3G and 4G is cheap and fast, which is useful for telephones, which are not very powerful. So that was not using Diffie Hellman. Now, if you use Diffie Hellman, this is the original one, the one I've described, not authenticated. Alice picks a regular exponent A, and Bob picks a random exponent B, and they just send G to the A and G to the B over the network. There's no authentication at all here. It'll work, but you don't know that this is really Alice, and you don't know that's really Bob. Nothing about this confirms the identity of the people. Therefore, you can do a man-in-the-middle attack. An attacker who can intercept the traffic can just pick a random exponent C, send it to Bob, and then send something else here. So they can pretend to be Bob from this side, and Alice will encrypt data with a key they have, and then they can pretend to be Alice on this side and get another key that Bob and each of these people will think they're talking to the people they want to talk to, but in fact they're handing all their data over to the attacker. So that's the problem. If you don't have any authentication, then you have no way to stop a man in the middle from intercepting and taking control of everything. So authenticated Diffie Hellman is how you fix that. You have to have some way to verify who you're talking to. And so you use something like public key signatures with a public key infrastructure. So Alice has a private and public key, and Bob has a private and public key. And now Alice can sign it with her private key, and Bob can verify it with Alice's public key. So that's just the way HTTPS works. You have these independent trusted authorities that keep track of who has each public key, and you can verify with the public key, and now an attacker in the middle is not going to be able to impersonate that. All right. So authenticated Diffie-Hellman stops eavesdroppers. They can't learn the shared secret, and neither party can control the shared secret. So it seems like a pretty strong protocol, although as we're going to see later, it does have some flaws. There is a replay value too. Eve can record and replay previous values to pretend to be Alice, but you can prevent that with key confirmation, where after you've negotiated the key, you now send a message and make sure the other person can decrypt it, where they have to say reply with that message plus a word, like a challenge handshake. This person could pretend to be Alice, but they don't actually have the shared secret key. You send a message and make sure they can read it at the other end and reply with a meaningful answer. Then you know that they really own the shared secret. That's how you prevent a replay attacker from fooling you. All right, now if you consider data leaks, if Eve manages to get A, she can impersonate Alice, but if you want to avoid that, then you include long-term secret keys. So your Eve is here knowing all this. All right, this is the attack. And so to prevent this, you'd have a long-term shared secret key like we had before that the attacker doesn't have. All right, there is another system, by the way, the MQV system, which is improved and probably more secure and approved by the NSA with better performance and more secure. You might recall this from previous chapters. This is quite common, that an advanced protocol appears that's actually better, but nobody uses it. And that's the same story here. You use long-term private keys and long-term public keys. And then you send these things and include these long-term public and private keys in it. This turns out to be a very secure, fast system, but the problem is it was encumbered by patents and nobody ever did it. So, all right. So it is strong. It's strong against data leaks, and it's even strong against a breach. But it's almost never used. It was encumbered by patents, complex and difficult to implement, and the previous system, Diffie Hellman, was considered good enough, so this one just never took off in popularity. All right, so here's a few ways things can go wrong, and after this I'll have a video with more things that can go wrong. So if you don't hash the shared secret I mentioned, then you just have a shared secret G to the AB, which is just a random number between 1 and P. And that's not the same thing as a random series of bits where every bit has a 50% probability being 0 or 1. For example, the first bit is probably more likely to be 0 because all the low numbers are here and not all the high numbers. So it's not really random, and therefore you shouldn't use it just the way it is. You should run it through a key derivation function to make every bit random. Otherwise, you're to some extent, some information about the key can be guessed. There are legacy Diffie-Hellman protocols in TLS 1.0 and I think 1.12. You have some of these anonymous Diffie-Hellman exchanges. Remember we talked about if it's anonymous, then you're subject to man-in-the-middle attacks. And there is anonymous Diffie-Hellman used in some of the really old protocols. And so you could, in principle, downgrade to these. When you do a TLS handshake, the client tells the server, I want to speak TLS, and there's a time when you negotiate the protocol. The server says, well, I have these protocols, and the client says, well, I only speak these, so we better use this one. They negotiate that back and forth. So you could make a client that says, I'm a really old client, I'm Windows 95 running IE version 3, I can only go up to like this one, so you have to speak that one. And if you still have the presence of these really weak old protocols, then you can downgrade to them, and that will weaken the cryptography. Also, there are unsafe primes available. OpenSSL allowed you to use these unsafe primes, and if that's true, then you can craft parameters that will reveal information about the private key. That particular problem was fixed, but as we'll see, some other problems were not fixed. So, let me get the Kahoot up. All right. Let's just make it another tab. For fake cell stations, China already has some news reports of 4G ones getting caught by police. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, there definitely are fake 4G stations. That's an interesting comment. Thank you. Favorites. right, and 141, chapter 11 should be somewhere. There it is. I may not have any Kahooters today. I'll give it a few more seconds. If I don't get any, I'll just do the Kahoots next week. All right, that's progress. It'd be nice if we can get at least 4. All right, I think I'll just do the Kahoots next week, and we'll see if we get more people then. So let me just stop this recording. I've lost the OBS. All right.